We have been running for weeks. We found shelter and been resting here in some old abandoned mining town while we wait the thaw. Hardly the spring I had been hoping for.
So what now, Dutch?
We get strong, we get warm, and we wait. You sound doubtful.
Not doubtful, just worried.
What do you think?
Wake up, Rabbid!
Oh, Kojima, no.
You have to make the video!
Which video though?
The best games of the year!
Which year?
You haven't been asleep that long. Go and grab your cane and stick.
Oh.
You must hurry, Rabbid!
Oh.
Looking back over 2018, you realise that a lot of different things happened. Some games came out, I made some videos, and we all had a great time. Right, that's my year in review done. Now to hibernate until something exciting happens, which is probably February because YouTube in January is damn depressing. I don't think 2018 was as saturated with good games as 2017 was, but I for one am thankful for what we did get. Still no Death Stranding or Final Fantasy VII Remake though. I'm gonna be the oldest of men when they finally come out. Based on previous years of making these videos, I find that it's generally a better idea to start off with the best games of the year. You want to start a new year off in a positive frame of mind, and nothing does that better than arguing over why the games I pick don't deserve the praise I give them. Yeah, that's a trend I've noticed where people seem to dogpile on the worst games, but also resent the actually good ones. I mean, come on, you're not gonna give some credit to games that actually deserve it? Let's try to leave that behind this year. I try to reserve a lot of time for simple games. You know, every year you'll have your fair share of groundbreaking titles that shift paradigms and provide a uniquely compelling gaming experience, but sometimes I'm not always in the mood for that. Sometimes you just want to sit down with something dumb and while away the hours fly fishing or crashing planes into the American countryside. It's been a dream of mine for years. I went into Far Cry 5 with very low expectations and left it with an equally low return on those expectations. But I still had a lot of fun along the way. And these have never really been complicated video games. The third one had some very interesting characters, but anyone and everyone from Ubisoft would be lying if they thought that the thought-provoking narratives were part of Far Cry's appeal to a wider audience. It proved the case again with 5 since the story is stupid with a somehow even stupider ending, but the experience of getting there is just a bunch of good wholesome fun. It's like the gaming equivalent of comfort food at times. It won't challenge you too hard and offers up a very simple route to catharsis without the need to get too invested in silly matters like context. Just as well, because I genuinely hate every ending you can possibly get from this game. I'm all for the bad guys were right all along, but this might be taking the piss. At least it helped to spawn a fun-looking spin-off game. So you're saying that there's upsides to the apocalypse? As I was compiling together a list of all the games I played last year, because that's a thing I do now so that I don't get all confused, I realised that I didn't play a ton of indie games in 2018. Whether it was a lack of word of mouth going around about this one particular mind-blowing indie game, or if I unconsciously focused more on AAA games this year. But in total, I probably played less than a dozen indie games last year. Luckily, what I did play left a fairly large impression on me, and even a game like A Way Out, which starts off like a fairly basic co-op game for you and a keen friend, has a lot more to it than meets the eye. A Way Out doesn't show its hand until much later on, so most of your time playing it will fall into the usual co-op archetypes of busting each other out of prison and bonding over this shared experience you're having with a friend. It's a very standard video game. Until everything falls apart. In a good way though, because if A Way Out was the same type of game for all the time you spend playing it, it wouldn't be anywhere near this video. The standard flow of gameplay isn't anything too spectacular, and the story doesn't try to uproot established conventions along the way, and so you're playing out time, potentially bonding with your co-op partner when, holy shit, one of you was a double agent all along and has betrayed your fellow Prison Break partner and also the friend you're playing alongside. It's a plot twist that affects everything surrounding this game in a major way, and turns a co-op game into a PvP duel between two characters and players who were getting along just fine a little while ago. It's like the end of Double Dragon, but you're not fighting over a girl, you're just fighting. I can like a game because of one thing, don't at me. Did you know that Detroit Become Human was the best RPG of 2018? No, it's true, it contains a lot of RPG-like qualities, and the way in which it implements turn-based combat is unlike any RPG I've seen in all my many years, covering pretentious David Cage games that are ultimately very far removed from being considered role-playing games. I kinda like this game, but probably not for the intended reasons, so I don't think I can put it on this list in any good faith. Though you can't forget that we got a new Monster Hunter game like nearly 12 months ago, and it's good for the right reasons, and also an actual RPG, so that's neat. And as my first foray into big scary console Monster Hunter, this is pretty good. A little overwhelming at times as there's a lot going on and I feel like I need to take extra classes just so I don't fall behind everyone else, but the whole dynamic of preparing to take on a giant monster by studying its habitat and planning a way of exploiting holes in its defenses is the kind of meticulous anal retentive game that I get out of bed for. Or you can put on your big boy trousers and wildly swing your weapon at this giant creature and see what happens. If I had more time, I could probably get super into this. It's probably where I'll go instead of catching up on Kingdom Hearts. It's a different kind of complicated. I really like this wave of indie developers who are making games that act like spiritual successors to games from their, and also sometimes my childhood. Wargroove is coming out in a few months and it's effectively Advance Wars, but given a bit of a facelift to fit in with modern times. And you know, I played it last year and it's really good, so I'm looking forward to that. Or you could play Into the Breach. That's out now, and it's pretty cool as well. Praise rarely comes higher than thinking a game by a small indie studio or just a couple of developers can be confused for something made by a much larger developer. From the outset, Into the Breach comes across as a very simple game that uses turn-based combat as a means of introducing time travel mechanics and roguelike objectives to create a really unique style of strategy game. The high praise that I'm about to give it is that it feels like something that Nintendo would be proud of. Occasionally you might feel a little overawed as you're protecting civilians and juggling all these objectives and responsibilities, but that's okay because look at that art style. It warms my cold dead heart. It's made by the same people who brought us Faster Than Light, which is shorthand for saying that it starts off delightfully simple and easy to grasp before beating your fucking face in with dramatic difficulty spikes. I'm kinda down for it though, because there's definitely a void in the market for these kind of strategy tactics games, and especially for ones that get this difficult this quickly. That's something else that indie games will do that someone like Nintendo maybe won't. Stupidly hard levels and scenarios. It just means I spend more time playing it. Spider-Man overexposure has to be a real thing at this point. I went to see Into the Spider-Verse recently, which was of course incredible, but then we had Venom last year, and now there's a new Spider-Man movie coming out in 2019, and there was also a video game, and at some point I can really imagine the average person deciding that they've had enough of Spider-Man. It's tricky though, because everything we've had with this character recently has been kinda wonderful, and I think becoming bored of something simply because it's everywhere rather than it being boring is kind of a weird reaction. Though, if we never got another Spider-Man game again, I'd probably be okay. I mean that in the best way, because the scope of Insomniac's vision has created a world in which you can happily spend all day web swinging around New York and not really getting anything constructive done, and yet feel perfectly content that you're using your time wisely. That was always my biggest worry coming into this game, that somehow traversing the overworld, one of the single most defining attributes of anything to do with Spider-Man, would somehow be overlooked in favor of flashy combat, but everything's okay, guys, don't worry. I didn't expect to like the story in this game, but Peter Parker is very likable and he takes some real setbacks throughout and is forced to grow from them. There's some real consequences to this story, and I'm surprised that's where we're starting from in this franchise. There were plans from the start to turn this into a mini-franchise of its own, but especially now that the world has taken to Spider-Man PS4 in such an overwhelming way, they'd be poorer for not trying to. Every time that Rockstar puts a game out, I feel like the world is left in a tricky position. The amount of work that goes into the average Grand Theft Auto or Red Dead Redemption game borders on insanity, and no amount of accolades can ever be a just reward for this level of detail. Neither can it justify grueling 100-hour weeks as some kind of noble sacrifice that employees make in order to get their massive AAA game released on time. Did I enjoy Red Dead Redemption 2 despite all the controversy surrounding it? Yeah, I guess I did in the end. Not as much as I thought, though. Because when there's so many journalists screaming into the void that Red Dead Redemption 2 is the fanciest, most impressive game that the world has ever seen, that might give off the impression that Rockstar have shifted gears and made something special. And I suppose they did in the end, since RDR2 is evidently a very capable video game that blends the usual Rockstar open-world shenanigans with a deeply engaging narrative that ebbs and flows all over the place. But there was definitely a general acceptance when this game came out that it was some kind of heaven-sent gift from above that we are unworthy to receive, and it just isn't. It feels a lot like the first game, which is a wonderful thing for a lot of reasons, but games have moved on in lots of subtle ways since 2010, leaving Red Dead Redemption 2 feeling a little archaic in important areas like combat. It's hard to say that I was disappointed by it, because obviously it's the 5th best game I played last year. Let's just say I was whelmed by it. Sea of Thieves gave me so many hours of fun in 2018. It's very slow at points and it isn't very fun at all on your own, but bring a friend or two along with you, and the joy you'll get from sailing the rough seas and digging up treasure and losing it all to the Kraken is kinda cool. But it wasn't the best seafaring game I played from last year, and I think it's important to get an accurate barometer considering all the pirate games that are coming out soon. I doubt any of them will be as good as Return of the Obra Dinn, though. I have a huge amount of affection for games that are significantly smarter than me. There was a moment when playing through Obra Dinn's intertwining scenarios as you slowly detail what exactly happened to every passenger and crew member who were unfortunate enough to have front row seats to the most eventful naval voyage in history, where I felt like I was being dragged out of my comfort zone. You can feel your mind being stretched in too many different directions at once as you try to retain very specific bits of information, and while it's obviously not for everyone, any game that challenges me in this way in particular, and practically demands that the player takes their time and thinks things over and maybe even, get a notepad and a pen, is quite special to me. Also this art style, which I feel would make most games at least 3 times more interesting, let alone one where you're technically filing an insurance claim. Video games can make anything interesting if they try hard enough. There were many examples last year of disappointing video games, where games were being hyped to Kingdom Come only to fall very short of where people expected them to be. No doubt I'll get many opportunities to talk about those games next week. But for now, I'd like to talk about a game that didn't get smashed by the hype. Heyo, it's me talking about Smash Bros again! I should try and do some more strange things like show off my beard wherever possible, and that weird finger flick thing I do at the end of every video. The time I had off at the start of the year gave me enough space for my thoughts on Smash Bros Ultimate to fester and develop beyond simply, holy fuck, there's a lot of Smash Bros in this game! Definitely when you're in the middle of a month dedicated to talking about it, it's very easy to get caught up in the moment and feel the need to stop everyone in the street to tell them how great Smash Ultimate is. 2 weeks later, I still feel the same. Although there are a few small things that hold this game back, I don't really notice them as problems when looking at Ultimate as a whole. As a concept, this game is insane, and really does act as a definitive mark of progress within the franchise that can't be matched anywhere else. But I'm also very happy that at no point did Nintendo or Sakurai rest on their laurels, and instead they made a game with smooth combat that rewards the time you put into learning how characters operate against others. We've already seen that Nintendo are more than willing to support Ultimate for many months later down the road, and it's gonna keep me going for a very long time. It's almost worth it to pay for the Switches Online now. Give me multiplayer Metroid Prime 4, and then we'll talk. It says a lot about the strength of indie games these days that every year we seem to have a handful that can be genuinely considered as Game of the Year. These are games made on a fraction of the budget of their AAA rivals, and when I think of the fun I had playing Assassin's Creed Odyssey compared to something like Celeste, there's no comparison whatsoever. I mean, it's gotta make for a great thesis where there absolutely isn't a correlation between finances or staff size and quality. Maybe Assassin's Creed Odyssey was made with love somewhere along the production line, but Celeste was made with genius. So many people told me to play this for the longest time, and you start to wonder if it's half the game that these people are alluding to it being. It's like a funky platformer where you can wall jump and dash, and I definitely haven't seen a couple dozen indie games that put an emphasis on precise platforming, with mistakes being instantly punished with death. Celeste is something extra though, with a level of refinement that I can't say I've seen before in this department, and with a story that makes thematic sense considering the weird and wacky levels you have to traverse using a very large array of skills and abilities. Go watch a speedrun of this game, specifically a tool-assisted speedrun, and just pick up your chin from the floor. Also, the soundtrack is straight up one of the best I've heard from any game in years, and easily the best of the year. It evolves as you progress through a level, which does a lot of storytelling on its own, and Lena Raine deserves all the credit in the world. Why didn't this take off like an Undertale or a Five Nights at Freddy's in 2018? I wish I was sick of seeing it. More and more now, we're seeing a push to blur the lines between cinematic and gameplay. That's usually a concern through which developers attempt to sell some fancy QTE cutscene as gameplay footage, even though it's hardly the most engaging or even the most accurate representation of the video game. The worry is that the other end of the scale is something like Metal Gear, where gameplay is interrupted by stylistically very different cutscenes and it's hard to maintain any sort of flow. We saw the perfect example this year. Who knew that it'd be called God of War though? God of War has been many things to many kinds of people in the past, but thoughtful and measured are not compliments you could have easily leveled to games where you bombastically tear heads off all day. And this is important to consider, especially since 2018's version of God of War was intended to be this dramatic rebooting of the franchise. One where the camera follows Kratos closely behind as he takes on all manner of unspeakable monsters from Norse mythology. You'd be forgiven for thinking that this kind of reimagining would leave behind everything that made God of War great. But sometimes reboots know what they're doing. The blending of styles is one thing that I absolutely love, but the way in which this action-orientated franchise has taken on quieter moments and a greater sense of occasion is an achievement that I think should be celebrated as the huge feat that it is. The seamless way in which the camera transitions from cinematics to gameplay is super impressive, and the fact that the whole game takes place within one camera shot is borderline ridiculous, and at that point, just a sign that Santa Monica is showing off. Rebooting a franchise without losing the core identity of said franchise has proven very difficult recently, and God of War achieves that at a canter. How and when do I get more of this into my life? This has been RabbidLuigi, and God of War 2018 has taken huge strides towards revolutionizing that little pocket of AAA gaming, to the point where I'm a little worried about my unrealistic expectations going into 2019. I'm gonna play games like Animal Crossing and Devil May Cry 5 and expect that level of detail and care and just attention to tiny little things, and that's a hard check to cash. Can't Santa Monica make every game?